You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. The dramatic reform of city council in the mid-1920s, led by Murray Seasongood, is famous in the mythology and histories of the city. Almost forgotten is a similar progressive reform of the Cincinnati Public School Board, which was led by Dr. John Withrow and Samuel Ock. 5 years earlier than the city council reform. For the last 75 years, these two entities have proceeded on separate, sometimes parallel, but rarely intersecting courses, until the past few months, that is. After last fall's election, members of the city council and the school board have taken steps to bring these two essential decision-making bodies into regular official contact. To discuss this new effort at cooperation, I am joined by David Crowley, a member of the Cincinnati City Council, newly elected, and Rick Williams, the president of the Cincinnati Board of Education. Rick, welcome back to Newsmakers Day. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you,
for the
Dan.
first time. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Why at this time? This is a long time. These two bodies have existed, dealing with the same people, the same concerns, the same city, and sort of living in these autonomous worlds. Why come together now? What is it that brought things together, Dave?
Well, in my mind, nothing is as strong as an idea whose time has come, and I think a series of circumstances have come together that made all of us who are concerned about education and concerned about the city realize that this is something that we just have to do. It's not even an option that we continue as we did before. It's just something we have to do for the future of our children. We talk about the future of the city and what we're going to do and how can we build the economic development and the infrastructure. Well, the future of our city is in the first grade. They're in the 7th grade, and we ought to be really working on that.
Rick, I could have had somebody on here 8 years ago, 10 years ago that says something like that. Is part of it, though, the particular confluence of personalities and people who are on these two bodies right now? Is it the election of a Dave Crowley? Is it the presence of certain people on the school board now that really makes this happen?
Of course it is. We've been doing things together for a while administratively, from crossing guards to nurses are ways that we interlock. The city of Cincinnati furnishes those things for the school district, so we have administrative histories together. But you're right, it's the personalities of the two groups that bring these, the sort of connection together in a formal way. We've had opportunities to do that actually before Mr. Crowley got on the city council, but now because of the efforts of enough of us, we're now able to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think the reason I bring that up, I think it's important to remember that sometimes it's people who make the difference.
It actually
Certain
is.
people will make things happen, even if the idea is right. Maybe the idea has to be right too, and the time has to be right. What's the goal here? What is the hope? What is the projected change in relationship? But what's the result that you really want from that, Dave?
What I'd like to see, Dan, is we have an opportunity now with the furtherance of the concept of the Neighborhood Learning Center. I mean, those are going back to why these things happen at this point. It is people, it is strong ideas, but there's opportunities. Certainly one is the development of the idea of the Neighborhood Learning Center, making the school, the neighborhood school, the center of the community, and building into it activities and programs that reach far beyond the basic elementary education. So we have a goal toward developing them in as many neighborhoods as we can. So it gives us some common ends to work for.
One of the things with that Neighborhood Learning Center concept is that's really built around the massive reform and the building of new buildings and changing structures so that this idea of the Learning Center can be there. You're about to invest $1 billion inside the city, and when I say you, I mean the school board, the Cincinnati Public Schools. This is a huge investment, a huge opportunity right now.
From an activity perspective, that's really what has brought us together. And you're correct, it takes the individual members to actually make it happen, but the real motivator here is $1 billion spent in this Cincinnati area. And in a lot of cases, in specific neighborhoods, we have multiple development sites, many existing sites that will no longer be used as schools. So we have a real opportunity to actually change neighborhoods as we implement this plan. It only makes sense to do that with the city administration and what activities they're involved in, the residents of those neighborhoods, That's our opportunity to really have some positive impact instead of simply doing isolated developments of schools without a consideration for what's happening around them.
I want to make sure, and we've talked about this before on here, but any one viewer might not realize it. When you say neighborhood learning centers, we're not just talking about a new school building. We're talking, at least hopefully, about a new concept of the relationship of what goes on in that physical structure to the neighborhood, right? Can you clarify that a little bit? What's going to be different about these places rather than just a name?
Well, the way I see them, they're going to be built, rebuilt for the purposes of a much more inclusiveness from the neighborhood. There'll be opportunities to build in more sophisticated recreation facilities, health clinics, maybe neighborhood police substations. So from the beginning, the concept's going to be, from the Board of Education's perspective, we want these to be more than just elementary schools. We really want them to serve the whole community. And one of the byproducts of that will be that the community will buy into that. I think that's already we're getting that kind of enthusiasm already from. In
fact, I think out in the East End, isn't there some of that planning? And what you're looking at is not just this new collaboration with the city and the school board, but collaboration with places, and you were mentioning recreation facilities, with the YMCA, as I understand it, with the Cincinnati Museum Center, with the police, with health officials. There's all of those groups that are new type of partnership for the school. Am I right, Rick?
You are correct. This is a public works project. So we have an opportunity to actually create a facility that serves the neighborhood. There will be education going on, but because we have the opportunity, why not add a clinic to that facility? Like you said earlier, we're talking about the same families. We're all serving the same constituency in the city. So why not have a police substation? Why not make it the mecca of recreation as well as education for that neighborhood? So we have these opportunities and a lot of cooperation from throughout the community and not just the city administration.
You know, when an entity, in this case the school board, does $1 billion of new construction, there's going to be conflicts, and I take it that in a place, in certain neighborhoods, there's going to be real issues about where the new building goes and what property it takes and what has to happen in transition. For example, I understand there's a bit of a conflict on the question of College Hill about what happens with the ball fields there. Right. How are you proposing that this new collaboration actually helps all of us get through that?
Well, I see that the way that will work is with this new collaboration, and not just between the two elected bodies, but more importantly probably at the administrative levels, that those kinds of issues will be identified earlier. This is the first go-around. This is a massive plan the Board of Education has put together, and it's logical that there be some loose ends. This is a huge problem. But the fact is that if the city administration, the city manager, and the superintendent of education and their key staffs are working on these issues as they come up, we'll prevent those kinds of problems from coming up, or we'll have a plan to deal with them. And so the fact that it's come up now, kind of after the plan has been in motion, doesn't surprise me at all, and I don't think it's a major problem.
Rick, Dave was saying that administrations have worked together in the past. And now we've got these problems. We're going to work together, importantly on the administrative level. But is this really new then, this collaboration, and will it really help solve issues like neighborhood issues that we were just mentioning, referencing, in some way different than what we had, 2 years ago?
Right. It's new based on degree. It's heightened. It's enhanced because of what we're doing. The relationship is not new, but it's enhanced now that we're collaborating. And what will happen on these incidents as they emerge is that we will together address them. A resident will no longer have to go to the school board meeting and say, this is a problem, and then go to city council and say, this is a problem, and have activities for those solutions working in different locations.
One of the things I have to ask is that if you know about what's happening nationally, whether it's in Chicago, it's in New York, it's in Boston, that strong mayors, we don't have a strong mayor, we have a stronger mayor, I keep making that point, but strong mayors have said, I've got to take over control of the schools again. The only way to recover the older inner cities, the older cities, is with a strong school system, and the mayor's office are taking control. Is this a first step to really putting these two bodies back together?
No, not at all. And we see that right up the road in Cleveland, where the mayor has taken over the school board. I don't think the city council or the mayor's office here, I know we have no interest in running a school board. When I first started campaigning on this issue, Dan, and I said, I'm going to call for a much closer collaboration at the policy level between the two elected bodies, I would get people from the audience say, my God, the city's messed up enough, don't mess up the school board, or the school board's messed up enough, don't add to that problem. And I've said from the beginning, that's not the intent. There's just so many areas, and to come back to Rick's point, there's been a collaboration before, but now it's at the policy level. It's now the policy of the Board of Education for their staff to work with the city of Cincinnati. It's now the policy of city government to work collaboratively. So it's a much enhanced and strengthened, as Rick has pointed out, relationship.
Okay. Rick, I want to take a moment here because there's this coming week some important things are going to be happening, and that is the issue about the new way that teachers are evaluated and that pay is linked to that evaluation contractually comes up for a vote by the teachers beginning this Wednesday. Is it, my understanding of the reading of the contract, the school board also could take a new vote at this moment and decide whether to go ahead or not to go ahead. Do you expect the school board in the next week to take such a vote?
I think that what we'll do is we will consider that as the, and I'll just be honest, political jockeying occurs because of the fact that this vote is about to happen. This evaluation system has been in place for about a year and a half. What the vote does, though, is links the evaluation to compensation for the teachers. And that is the critical piece that really gives meat to the entire evaluation system. So as that moves to the point of decision making, that's the biggest risk, and that's when, of course, all of the jockeying occurs.
My understanding is that either 70% of the school board or 70% of the teachers could end that linkage so that it doesn't take place.
That's correct.
If you take a vote in the Board of Education this week, do you have 5 votes, or do you have, are there fewer than 5 votes who would vote against that? Do you have 3 or more votes who will vote to keep this linkage?
It's hard to tell because we have not had a group conversation about this, but this will occur Monday. So Monday is our only opportunity to make that vote because the vote for the teachers occurs on Wednesday.
Are you personally, will you vote to link those two things, evaluation and compensation, to keep the plan as it is?
Actually, yes, I don't have to do that vote. It's on course for that. So I would have to participate in killing it, and I won't participate in killing it.
You support this new plan?
I support the new plan, absolutely. The whole plan was developed in tandem with CFT and
the
administration.
You know, there's a whole controversy going on out there that there's been some compromises offered, but the school board, and I talked to the school teachers, and I talked to Sue Taylor yesterday, said that there isn't time to consider those. Is there still time? If they vote for them, are you still willing to implement those changes?
Oh, of course. They were put on the table because those were the things we wanted to do to modify the plan. And we've been modifying this plan from the beginning. It's authored by both the teachers union and the administration and the Board of Education. We've been working together to create it. If this goes into place, we'll continue to work together to make amendments as we need to, as they are agreed, like we do every other part of the contract. This is purely about the link of compensation to evaluation, which is the way most of us are evaluated, and those links on the jobs that we have.
Okay. Be an interesting week coming up. We'll be watching.
Very.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Good luck on this collaboration.
Thank you.
It can't overstress its importance. Stay tuned. As the rains fell and the area's small streams rose last week, many people watched nervously. After the break, a talk with someone trying to do something about the long-term future of the Mill Creek. Welcome back. The heavy rains of the past week focused attention once again on the threat of flooding on the area's small streams, especially on the Mill Creek. The Mill Creek is much more than the main stem that thousands of people see every day as they drive along Interstate 75. It is best thought of as a web of creeks and streams that form a watershed which drains 166 square miles of central Hamilton and Butler counties. Certain sections of that system are more prone to flooding than others, as Frank Graff reminded us last Wednesday.
The geese seem content, the carp overjoyed. They're the only ones happy when the Mill Creek overflows. The city of Sharonville wants to keep the water in its place. Crews are clearing storm sewers and cleaning out tributaries. The city also now has an early warning system that lets emergency crews alert dozens of businesses bordering the creek that waters are rising.
We can contact the 911 communications center. They will turn it over to a telephone computer that will contact the businesses in the corridor and tell them at their emergency numbers there's a flooding situation coming on.
Anything that we can do to improve our reaction time to salvage equipment and all of our things inside, like our stock and all that, anything helps.
Ralph Brewer could have used that early warning time. There's dry pavement now. Last July, Brewer would have been swimming. The Mill Creek waters ruined 11 trucks. Employees spent countless hours cleaning. The company doesn't stock as much inventory anymore, and as evidenced by the chairs already on desks, employees are more cautious.
We never get used to it, so, we try to stay more prepared. Each time we learn a little bit.
We're buying about an hour, but an hour can be quite valuable.
To talk about the present condition and future prospects of the Mill Creek, I am joined this morning by Robin Corathers, the Executive Director of the Mill Creek Restoration Project. Robin, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you. Good morning.
Is it true or is it an illusion that flooding is getting worse on the Mill Creek?
Well, I think first of all, people need to understand that flooding is a natural phenomenon. Rivers flood, that's what they do. It's part of their life cycle. And the problem is when we build homes and businesses and other structures in the river's floodplain. I think flooding is becoming more frequent in Mill Creek communities. Unfortunately, a lot of the floodplain of the river has been paved over. There's been a lot of development over the past 10 years. And I think it's important to know that development not along just along Mill Creek, but also along the tributaries to Mill Creek are also exaggerating or exacerbating the problem.
So when, for example, that second version of that map that we saw at the beginning, and if we can put that back up, it would be good, the one with the floodways in it. You're saying that as development occurs, as we build houses with driveways, as we build stores with parking lots, there isn't any place for that water to go anymore. It now runs off rather than percolating into the ground.
Right.
Is that basically what is happening?
Well, that's part of the picture. Water does hit those hard surfaces. It runs off faster, and there's more of it going into the streams. So there isn't the infiltration of water in the soil. In many places there are no trees and vegetation to absorb some of that water, to slow it down, to store it. Floodplains, by the way, are there for flood storage. That's their purpose, their natural purpose. So when those natural functions are gone because they've been paved over and development has occurred, you're going to see more and more problems with flooding.
There's going to be implications someplace. One of the things that we've seen this past week is houses in subdivisions where there's literally mudslides with whole backyards falling away and decks falling off of houses. Is that just going to happen, or is there some way you can, is it that those houses just shouldn't be there?
Well, in fact, they shouldn't be there. A lot of development has occurred, unfortunately, even in the river floodway, which is the high hazard area that's needed to convey flooding, flood waters. And so, some of those properties that are repetitive loss, that have suffered major damages, they really need to be relocated out of harm's way. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow, both for the property owners and for the communities, but in some cases it's really the best thing to do.
not in the case of the Mill Creek, but we ran another story this week with somebody on a small creek. This was up in Butler County, where the people said, well, we're just going to insist that they build a dike to protect our area. What about that kind of approach as opposed to clearing people out of the floodway?
Well, when I'm talking about clearing people out, I'm saying those that have repetitive losses year after year. Clearly in an urban watershed like Mill Creek, there are thousands of properties that are in the floodplain. And I think there are ways that we can reduce flood damages, but it's a myth if you think you can control flooding. And I think there are a lot of soft engineering solutions. For example, we need to have more detention of stormwater and flood events.
And what does that mean?
It means that we can construct wetlands and we can create retention basins in floodplain areas where there is still room.
And I think we actually have some images of some wetlands that you are trying to restore that they're on this, this is a bird, as long as this is up. Sometimes in Mill Creek, what is this bird?
This is a black-crowned night heron, and there is a rookery, a little colony of these birds along Mill Creek near the Ohio River, and it's the only inland rookery of these birds in the state of Ohio. The only other colonies are on islands in Lake Erie.
And I bet here, is this some of the wetlands we were talking about that you're trying to reestablish?
Yes, these are wetlands within the channel of Mill Creek in the city of Cincinnati. And wetlands are amazing because they really can absorb and store a lot of water. They also provide important habitat for plants and wildlife. And they help to filter pollutants from water. So they essentially help to clean the water.
Okay, so one of the things that Mill Creek Restoration is trying to do, your organization is trying to do, is reestablish some of those wetlands. Is that correct?
That's true. Reestablish the wetlands, but also look at the land along the rivers and the tributaries to Mill Creek and begin to reforest and revegetate those areas. Trees and plants can slow down and absorb water. The soil is able to percolate water to replenish the groundwater supply. And there are just many wonderful reasons for doing greenways. And greenways are basically linear corridors of open space with trees and other green stuff in them. And they help to connect people and places together and wildlife with their habitat.
Right now we're seeing a map of one of the greenway areas that you're proposing in the Caldwell Park area of Cincinnati, close to the northern boundary of the city. One of the things about Mill Creek, because it spans such a large area, it flows through, and not just the main stem, but all the tributaries, the watershed, and that's how we have to think about this thing.
Yes.
Is that it is part of numerous jurisdictions.
Right. There are 37 different political jurisdictions in this one watershed.
And who is the decision maker when you have 37 political jurisdictions?
Well, that's a dilemma, and that's why at the very beginning, when Mill Creek Restoration was created in 1994, is that we worked with other people to create a watershed council so that those 37 political jurisdictions could be represented and could begin talking to each other and coordinating efforts for Mill Creek improvements.
What's the relationship of those local jurisdictions to the Army Corps of Engineers? Because we all know the Army Corps of Engineers, when it comes to flood control and it comes to pouring concrete and channelizing the river, or the streams in this case, they are a big factor here. What's the relationship of local influence to the Corps?
Well, the Corps of Engineers started a channelization project on Mill Creek over 25 years ago. Unfortunately, they did use channelization in some places on Mill Creek in Hamilton County, and that channelization has created significant damage, physical, chemical, and biological. What's happening now is the Corps of Engineers is working with local communities and their local sponsor, the Conservancy District here, to reevaluate that entire flood control project. Even the Corps of Engineers knows now that there is no thing called flood control, but there are ways that they can work with local communities to reduce flood damages. And communities like Coleraine Township, Anderson Township, the village of Fairfax are taking advantage of both state and federal programs to relocate buildings out of harm's way.
You know, one final, we have less than a minute left. I mean, that's on the governmental level. What about on the people level? Can individual citizens who care about this area, care about the floodway, the greenway, can they work with you?
Absolutely. We've worked with over 2,000 volunteers in the last couple of years. Our volunteers, they're students, they're civic groups, businesses that send their entire staff out to help us. Everyone can get involved in cleaning up and greening up Mill Creek, planting trees, planting butterfly gardens. We have a variety of activities for volunteers to help us with. One
of the things I want to put up the telephone number, how to get in touch with Mill Creek Restoration Project, 513-731-8400. Robin, thank you for being here. It's been very good. We'll have you back as we talk more about this.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. We close this morning with a portion of a story I did with Stan Hedin back in 1995. Have a good week.
If you choose the right place in Caldwell Park and squint, you get a glimpse of what the Mill Creek must have been like 250 years ago.
The creek flowed underneath the canopy of trees. A squirrel could anywhere along the Mill Creek go from one side of the creek to the other, just through the branches above it. We had turkeys, ruffed grouse, some birds that have since become extinct, Carolina parakeet, passenger pigeon, and then we had bears and puma and elk.
But since the moment the first settlers arrived in 1788, the Mill Creek has suffered. The final blow came in the 1980s, when the Army Corps of Engineers turned much of the creek into a concrete gutter in an effort to control flooding.
The lesson is it's a civic embarrassment. This creek is us as much as the Ohio River is us. So we shouldn't have to be embarrassed about an important part of our history.